What is up, guys? Welcome to Meaning of Podcast. I am Andres.
This is RB3.
I'm Sabrina.
And this is the podcast where we talk about all your favorite film directors and the deeper meaning within their films. This episode, we're doing something very different. We're talking about a Disney classic and a new Disney movie that's coming out. We are talking about Mulan, one of my favorite Disney movies, if not my favorite Disney movies. I was telling you guys before we went on air that I'm a Mulan stan, like hardcore Mulan fan. I think I've seen this movie like hundreds, if not 1,000 times. But I'm excited to talk about the OG and then obviously the original, and then obviously the new one as well once we get to that. But first, we're going to start with the original. I want to start with the question, first time watching this movie, your first reaction. Obviously, for the most part, I feel like it'll be when you were a kid. Is that right, Sabrina?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I went through a phase with all these films with The Little Mermaid and Mulan that I would watch these. My mom still talks about it to this day because she thinks it was like when I found my love of film. I would watch them on repeat till I memorized them, and then I would move on to another one. Kind of how I have it with Mulan. I really, really loved it when I was a kid. I played on repeat, and then I've kind of strayed away from all of those for the past like decade. I just haven't really revisited a lot of the Little Mermaids and Mulans that I loved when I was a kid. But yeah, when I was younger, I was probably like four, like 3 or 4. The second I could like watch and understand everything was when I started watching these types of films.
How about you, RB3?
Yeah, I don't even remember my first time watching Mulan. It's one of those ones that like has been around for me like my entire childhood. Must have been when I was a real little kid. I always loved this movie from the very beginning because it's like the perfect mixture of like martial arts and like, and just with the Disney animation on top of, you can't get past the Eddie Murphy, and just that comedic relief. I mean, it was just all perfect. It was like designed for me as like as a Disney animated kid, especially during that time, pre, Princess and the Frog or whatever. It felt like the most identifiable. And then I remember. When I was in high school, actually, I was in the drama program, and every single year, like, we would do like a holidays around the world, like kind of a festival during like December time, and every year we would perform "Making a Man Out of You" as our routine. So I remember every year for one we would watch Mulan every year, and for two we would watch that scene obsessively to like reenact it like in our little theater thing. So I always had a deep connection to Mulan. To me, I think it's the most modernized of that era of Disney films. You know what I mean? Like I think it holds up the best out of all of those. Obviously, like Beauty and the Beast still holds up a lot too in Lion King, but I think in terms of what represents the most current values of today, like back then, I think Mulan definitely takes from that. So I always loved and appreciated that movie.
Yeah, obviously, I echo everything you guys said. When I was a kid, I saw this movie. This movie came out in 1998. So I was at that perfect age group to see this kind of movie. And like you said, RB3, this was like the perfect combination of like my love of kung fu films, martial arts that I already grew up with when I was like 5, 6, 7 years old, coming into this first movie. And like you said, man, the message and the theme of Mulan goes harder than almost any other movie. I think the soundtrack goes harder than almost any other Disney soundtrack. Nothing is more gangster and nothing is more fire than the start of Make a Man Out of You, RB3. As soon as you hear "Let's get down to business," you're like, "Oh, let's go, bro, let's
To
go."
defeat
Yeah,
the
bro.
Han. Yeah.
Like every single time, like "Let's get down," I'm just like, "Let's go."
Yeah.
I just want to go hard. And then the final, I'm gonna talk about the soundtrack a lot, but the final chorus when it's like essentially like just a choir, a cappella, and you just hear like the men's choir in the background, and it's like coursing river, and you're just like, let's go.
Yeah.
It's the hardest Disney song ever, dude. I swear.
And the
Yeah.
thing is, like, talking about the soundtrack, Reflection is one of those songs that have
Oh,
definitely like lived on for karaoke and for everything like that. Even Christina Aguilera, her version of the song, and also that scene in general was one of the ones that I remember as a kid watching, and kind of like this young woman reflecting on herself, reflecting on her life. It's a really powerful thing when we think about it in that way, and it sets up the tone for the entire film. So even if it's not the most like hard-hitting song in terms of like the beat and like the way we feel, it's like it is and it's still a bop. It is a soft bop. It is so good.
Yeah, yeah.
I think Reflection, no joke, might be the best. I'm not even tripping. I'm not even like overstating the best Disney song ever. Like I'm putting it up there with A Whole New World because I think A Whole New World might be like all timer. But Reflection is the most underrated and the best Disney song in my opinion. Like that is the best Disney princess song of all time. No
No,
joke.
rewatching it, I seriously was like taken back to being a kid watching it for the first time. And it's one of those things because it gave me chills watching it for this episode in preparation. It's one of those things, it's iconic. The scene is iconic. I remember when I was a kid, I used to like act out the same way, like she's taking out like she's just being herself and she's transforming into herself and taking out of like what her gender stereotype did at that time in her culture. And it's something incredibly powerful because it really is setting Mulan up as a character. It's doing so much in just one scene and one song. Ooh, it's one of those things. That one goes hard.
Yeah, that's a brilliant song, Oscar nominated song from the movie. And it's funny because when we talk about both the ideas of reflection we talked about, Sabrina, like the whole contemplation of like gender and like your place in the patriarchy, I think that plays into the theme of the entire movie, which I think is so postmodern and brilliant, and which I think it looks at how women and how females are in this society are kind of trapped in this patriarchal trap, in this kind of patriarchal society where the men control everything. The men control the household. The men control the warfare. Like everything is from top down controlled by men. Even her whole goal, even her family's whole goal for her is to get married and to honor their family name by getting married to a man. So it's like and having that be saying that you're not even seeing a reflection of yourself anymore, where your personality is being diminished by the society that you're living in, is powerful and really universal, I think. So I think that's why it so speaks to us. And I think again, Andres, going back to the patriarchy thing, you talk about we loving the song "Make a Man Out of You" because that is the most manly, masculine, patriarchal song, almost to like a satirical level, like pretty much to a satirical level. But that's like it's supposed to be the most like manly man, and then you have to watch her like overcome all of that. So I think it's just brilliant storytelling all around this movie, and the way it weaves that theme into traditional Chinese culture and history, real life history, I think is just even more fascinating. So.
Yeah,
That's
I
the
mean,
thing.
I'm sorry, Sabrina. I just want to
Well,
give more credence to your point. The lyric of that if I were to truly be myself, I would break my family's heart. That's like the hardest line, in my opinion, in reflection. But yeah, I just keep going. Absolutely.
well, 100% that one. And that's the thing is that this film does so much storytelling through the song and through those scenes that it really is essential. It's when you go through those, you understand so much about the film and so much about the characters that are in the song. And talking about reflection, when she's looking at herself and she's that her place in the world is not the one that she wants it to be. The one that society sets to her is not where she wants to go. And it's also interesting because when we're kids, we watch something like that and it really does, it tells us about culture from another time. And that's what I found really interesting with these Disney animated films of that time, is that they immerse us into something else and we kind of get to see the experiences that women have had in previous times that we are still reflective in society today. Not as extreme, but it's something that we have seen over the last few decades slowly diminish. It's a running theme whenever we think of women in film, especially if we have that heroine protagonist and someone who doesn't fit the mold of what a woman is, when it's like the softer, the sweeter, the soft-spoken type of female that, you know, does what society wants her to do. When we have those types of strong women, like we've seen recently with like a Katniss in Hunger Games, it's a very similar type of like characterization between Katniss and Mulan, and that's one that resonated with a lot of people over the last decade because we see these strong female protagonists break the mold of what society tells them that they need to be.
Yeah, and that seems the entire Mulan story in a nutshell is the idea of her breaking that mold, and not just breaking the mold, Sabrina, but really exemplifying that she's better than all the men. smarter, faster, stronger, literally better in every single way. The way that throughout the movie she has moments that shows her superior by taking down the avalanche and creating an avalanche and taking down that hill over the mountain, wiping down the Huns, and saving the entire army, shows her ingenuity and her smarts and her ideas that are a little bit left field necessarily than traditional military aspects of traditional Chinese military. That scene to me is just a perfect example of how it shows that Mulan can be better than these soldiers in that. So, yeah, I love it. Talk to me a little bit about that, about her having a mind of her own, because I think that's first and foremost, and then we get to the physical aspect. But her being her own mind and thinking for herself is what makes her Mulan. Sabrina.
Oh,
Yeah,
so
sorry.
for like no, it's all good. In that sense, it is something that when like you talked about, it's really interesting because her place in the world is not there in that moment, but she ends up saving everyone. If she wasn't there, what possibly would have happened? And that's the thing. It's like, oh, deciding someone's place just by gender or anything like that is really limiting what we can all do as a society together and as humans working together. And the way she is with every single thing, it's how we need every type of person when it comes to leadership and when it comes to all those type of realities, because that's where it really shines. When you have every different type of person who, she even might not be the like, she encapsulates everything. She encapsulates that courage, the bravery. Her stepping out there in general in place of her father just shows right there, if someone's willing to take that step and that leap and they believe that they can do it, then let them, and they can. And it just goes to show what we've said before with the whole like breaking the mold, is she couldn't quite find her place because she wasn't given the opportunity to really show where she shines, and she doesn't show how smart women can also be in terms of the battlefield the way they've only had men do it at that time.
Yeah, well, my thing too, RB3, is the idea that her being herself and her going her own way and her kind of defying these principles and these cultural aspects to her life is bringing dishonor to her family, and how she has to choose between, do I be true to myself or do I honor my family by demeaning myself? And it's that question that she's tussling with in the very beginning of this movie, and then obviously at the end she can find both. But what do you think of that aspect? The idea that being true to yourself will harm your family, something that you hold so dear to you. What do you think of that thematic theme throughout the movie?
Well, I think that's a universal truth that a lot of people deal with. I think that's something that is at the forefront of a lot of people's minds as, children, especially as somebody like Mulan, who is so molded in a so highly patriarchal society where the father is so meaningful, means so much to the household, that losing that presence would just be, terrifying and terrible for that family in their situation. So, but on top of that, not even going on like the societal levels, on the personal level, there's always a seemingly like obligation for children to pay back their parents, to owe their parents, to feel like they are needing to give back for what their parents have contributed to them. So that's a constant theme that we've seen run throughout a lot of Disney movies as well. I mean, I think that's something that's prevalent in Beauty and the Beast with Bella and her father, and that's the Lion King as well. That's literally like the entire story of Simba trying to chase the ambitions of his father and losing that in the process. So that kind of fear, that kind of anxiety of losing family and burdening family, on top of like the fear of having self-identity. And that's just the universal truth for women. That's the universal truth for people in the LGBTQ community. That's a universal truth for people who are suffering from like diseases that they, can't tell people about. That's the truth for a lot of different aspects of reality. So it's really sad and unfortunate, but that, especially in that time period with in China during and how deeply formed and structured the patriarchal system was ingrained into the livelihoods of people and like their mindset. I imagine it would have been really tough for Mulan to make that decision, but that's what makes her story so unique and so amazing.
And going off of that, it's something that we see it in the lens of this time period in this culture, but it, as you said, it is something that can span any generation in any culture, because we look at it with the LGBTQ community, like you said, or anyone else. It really is just that idea of, if the person that you are in some way like affects your family or harms your family emotionally, and in her case, like in society, if she isn't, we see it when she's getting like the matchmaker, when it doesn't go her way, and it's like you bring dishonor on your family just for something as simple as that, and she didn't really even do anything too wrong. It was just the molds of her breaking out of them. So it's one of those decisions every day that anybody can kind of relate to, whether you're a man, whether you're a woman. It doesn't matter who you are, but it's also an extra step to see a woman breaking that 100% and being the strongest, being the bravest, being the smartest in those situations.
Yeah, what's even more interesting is the idea that what these Disney films are essentially saying, because you're right, RB3, there is a lot of them, right? Is that it's better to be true to yourself, and in that way, you're honoring your family. In a way, being true to yourself is more honor to your family because you're giving credit to them for raising you the right way to pick your own identity and to pick your own thoughts and your own beliefs. And in the long run, your family will eventually come to terms with the idea of you going on a different path. Obviously, that's what we see at the end of the movie, at the end of Mulan. Yeah, it's very, like you said, Sabrina, it's very like strong in current terms, because there's a lot of cultures that are very traditional and are very by the book and by the numbers, where you have to keep a certain way and you have to do things a certain way. I think a lot of people don't necessarily talk about it because in American culture, it's kind of like a free whatever. But in other cultures, like Latino culture is the only one I can speak of, but Latino culture is very traditional. But even nowadays, Chinese culture and Eastern cultures are keeping certain things in mind as to how they want a family household to be. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, Sabrina.
Yeah, well, it's like you said. I mean, growing up in a household, something that we kind of experience like as immigrants is that our grandparents are very by the book, the way that they were raised, and times, and it's just kind of like an ignorance to something new and different. It's not any like prejudice, but something that we've talked about a little bit before, but that like we've seen there is like homophobia, and there is just kind of like being afraid known and something that they haven't experienced themselves. And they even say the term cross-dresser in this film, talking about Mulan, which is interesting because like hearing that obviously in like current times, because even though this takes place in a different time period in China, I mean the way that they speak and the dialogue is very modernized for that time in like the 90s and all of that. It's not it doesn't keep the traditional like dialogue the way that they would
Yeah.
speak in that time
You know,
period.
Mushu ain't no traditional, Chinese character.
Exactly, and that's the way that they talk, and they say stuff like cross-dresser and things like that, and it's in this film it's very blatant and it's obvious, and something that a lot of us experience in real life, no matter what culture you're a part of, no matter what religion you're a part of. People sometimes just are afraid of what they don't know and haven't experienced and don't understand as much, and so that's what we experience with her ancestors and how they think of her and her family and how they view her.
Yeah, and it's interesting that all her ancestors are seen in this spirity form, but they're still like super old. Like they have
Yeah.
old people voices and old people faces, so it's that traditional, like you said, Sabrina. It really does look like, oh yeah, I could totally see this happening in real life, where it's a bunch of old people being like, my son is crap because he chose to do this, and it's like that's still old ideals and old traditions that people don't let go, and it's very negative and it's hurtful, and it doesn't lead anywhere. And that's why it's the perfect idea of Mushu being the one to pass the mantle to Mulan and not the Great Dragon, which I forget the name of it, but that's the idea of a new, different perspective, and not just the old traditional perspective that's literally made of stone, that to show how old and ancient this is. Yeah, obviously there's so much there. I want to jump to the martial arts aspect of this movie and the idea that a woman can keep up with the men in that sense, especially with the idea of traditional Chinese martial arts. There's obviously kung fu, which a lot of it is what it's based on, but there's a whole ton of wushu, and obviously we'll get to the live action movie as well, which features a ton of wushu. The martial arts person, I put on my martial arts hat, and I think about the idea of the thematic elements inside the martial arts, where it's more about evasion and distance, and agility than anything else, and those are all things that a woman can do. If anything, even better than the men, as we see in Mulan. Yeah, talk to me about that, RB3. The idea that she's able to keep up with these guys using her agility, using her athleticism as a way to evade and avoid an attack at the right moment.
Well, yeah, I think, when you go to the concept of wushu and that form of martial arts is very much influenced by like energy, wind, chi, all that kind of stuff. So that stuff that we talked about before in our Ang Lee episode with Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and how it represented that, kind of more whimsical interpretation of his martial arts and of his kung fu and wung fu and all that kind of stuff. But I think what makes Mulan special, especially the animated version, is that the animated version does a really good job of making her look like a boy within like the girl suit and makeup and whatnot, but like she definitely moves a lot differently than like everybody else. Like she definitely has a more like angelic kind of balance, a more alignment with moving through spaces, and it's kind of hard to explain, but the way the animation style with her is notably different than it is with the other characters. And I think on top of that, it just goes to the whole animation style of this movie, which I talked about a little bit before. But I love like when there's like that little smoke that pops up. It's the little, the little round, the spherical designs. Just little details that just represent the influence of the culture that it represents, I think is really cool. So I think her having that a little bit of a heightened ability plays into it. I think they lean into it a lot heavier in the live action movie, but yeah, I think in the animated version is really cool.
And exactly what you said, she's just a lot lighter on her feet, and it is with this animation. As I'm not like an animation expert, and it might be nostalgia, but I completely prefer this style of animation and animation the way it looked at this time to like a lot of the stuff now. I don't know why it is, but it feels very rich in character, and it just feels deeper. I don't know what it is, and it might totally be nostalgia, but like you said, when we are able to kind of disguise her in with the groups of men a little bit better, through the animation and the way she looks, like she's pretending like broad-shouldered and things like that, so she doesn't stick out as much. But like you said, she's incredibly light on her feet, and when she's fighting, she's definitely agile and like really quick in that way, and something that we would see because she's just a very like fit and strong woman, so she's able to do that a lot better than some of the men that she's around can.
Yeah, I love that aspect of the whole movie, and the idea that she's able to keep up because the martial arts allow her to keep up, because it is her training that provides that opportunity. That's why I'm obsessed with training sequences and the idea of training and the idea of a teacher and a sensei, because I feel like that shows progression, and it shows the idea of behind martial arts, like what a lot of people don't know. And I'm gonna geek out one sec, guys, I'm sorry, but I have to. The idea of martial arts isn't necessarily to use your athletic ability to overcome an opponent. It's more about using what you have as a tool, right? So if I'm a small guy, there is a martial arts art form that allows me to use different aspects of my body to take down a larger opponent. For example, BJJ, which is the biggest martial art in MMA, mixed martial arts, is all about leverage. And it's all about picking weak spots in your opponent. So weak spots are usually the neck, the arm, the leg, the ankle, little spots there that you can twist and pull and move around using your leverage, which will take down a larger opponent. That's something that it's straight out of Bruce Lee. It's a game of death, for crying out loud, when he faces Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. He gets him in close, takes down his legs, and uses literally a chokehold to take him out. This is my obsession with martial arts. I'm sorry, guys, but it's that idea of it doesn't matter who you are. If you're taught the correct way to use this art form, because it is an art form, that is how you can take down your opponent. It doesn't matter if you're a man or woman, if you're, old, young, Asian, not Asian. That is the perfect example of what it is. And that's why I love the idea of the woman being taught the same martial art and coming up with the same results, if not better results, using her ability. So that's my little geek moment. Sorry, guys. But I want to move on to close up the conversation on the original Mulan. I can go on and on and on about the soundtrack, and I won't, guys. I mean, A Girl Worth Dying For, Reflection, Make a Man Out of You. Even the first song when she's getting ready for the matchmaker.
Yeah.
All these are bangers, bro. Like straight up bangers. But the purpose of this movie is the ending, right? Where the emperor realizes that his traditional old school ways would have left him dead, right? If it wasn't for Mulan going out of her way, disobeying, going against her family, going against her culture, he would be dead. And the Huns would have taken over China. And that's the perfect example of how change can happen. And she's an instigator of change. She's a spark of change. Yeah, RB3, if you want to finish up with that idea of her creating a new movement and a new idea inside her own culture.
Well, I think that's what resonates so much about this movie. I think it relates to a lot of people, especially a lot of young people. I think that kind of motivation, that kind of idea that, you could be someone who's not supposed to be there, who's an outsider, who is fighting against all kind of standards in society, patriarchal standards, racial standards, cultural standards, and overcoming all of those to succeed for the greater good. I think that's a powerful message. I think that's something we see in real life heroes like AOC, or other really prominent, powerful women in our society have all been game changers and have all had to make super big sacrifices to get to that point. So I definitely think that's important, and I think that's a good message to represent, especially for watchers of Disney animated films, because frankly, I personally think, and we're going to talk about this more when we talk about the live action Mulan, but I think this was, like I said before, this was the most woke animated film, back during that time period. So much so that I didn't even really see where they could go forward with the live action one, because their whole goal is, for these live action movies have been to kind of make it more modern, make it more pleasing to today's time. But I feel like this movie has always been about today, and I think it's about tomorrow and for the future going forward. So I applaud Mulan. It's one of my favorite Disney movies as well, and I think I think this should be definitely high on the list to watch with young kids, especially I think over something like Cinderella or Snow White. I think this is definitely way more important than that. So,
any final thoughts, Sabrina?
Yeah, 100% echoing everything you guys said. I mean, this shows, especially the ending that you talked about, it shows how positive, progression really is. His life is ultimately saved because of this change that he doesn't even allow. So when you go into the unknown, when you let things around you happen the way society is progressing, you'll have a lot of positive changes. That's truly, there's nothing bad that possibly could come out of it. It's only going to make everything better. It's only going to make society better, and I think it tells the story in a really beautiful way.
Yeah, sorry, you said Into the Unknown, and I kind of geeked out there for a second. I was just like, oh no, Into the Unknown. I won't do it. Sorry, Frozen 2. Shout out to Frozen 2. Uh, but yeah, I really do feel like this movie hits a lot on the head, and the fact that it is, like you said, RB3, it's the first kind of like action Disney movie that features a female protagonist, where you can argue that this isn't necessarily a Disney princess. Technically, Mulan isn't a Disney princess. She doesn't fit that mold of having that royal bloodline and kind of, the dresses, the whatever. This is a warrior. She's a fighter. She's a warrior. She's like I said, she's an instigator of change. She's a spark of change. Yeah, which to me really stands tall above the rest of the Disney movies, and that's why I rank it as like my number two, maybe under Aladdin. But those can jump around in my top two because I love both these movies. I think they're incredible.
You only like Aladdin because it's a man's name in the title, huh?
Like every other
Come
Disney
on.
movie.
Yeah.
So progressive of you.
No,
come
that's
on.
really not true at all.
I'm just kidding.
No,
Yeah,
it's
I know.
no, that's 100%. That's the thing. It's like my biggest issue, even with just like any film in general, whether it's a live action film or anything like that, is when the woman is used as a tool of being a damsel in distress. That is like the most annoying thing to see on screen, when the woman provides absolutely nothing and she's only the damsel in distress that all the men have to come and save, and that's what furthers the film. That's the most ridiculous thing to me. So I love the fact that you're highlighting that she's a warrior. She doesn't need any of them. She's actually helping them all out. They're the damsel in distresses in this story, and she's the one that leads them all. It's really great.
Yeah, you could argue that the Emperor is the damsel in distress and that she's saving the day. She's the Super Mario of the story. Shout out to Mario. I know. Shout out to Mario as if he's gonna be like, "Yo, what up?"
Yo, Mario, thank you on this.
Yeah, exactly, bro. He's gonna be like, "Yo, oh yeah, I love you."
It's me.
Yeah,
Subscribe
exactly.
to First Cut.
He's like, "Watch
Like
out
the
for
video.
Donkey Kong." Yeah, that's my boy. That's my boy Mario, bro. But either way, that is our discussion of the first Mulan, the OG Mulan. After the break, we're going to get into the new one, the one that you guys are obviously want to talk about because you've just seen it if you're watching this. So make sure you guys stick around after the break.
This ain't funny, so don't you dare laugh. With the 4/5 divide you in half. You getting at me equals a club half. You do the math, take you out the equation.
Check out this vlog that myself and Dorian did on our trip to Las Vegas to see Christopher Nolan's new movie, Tenet. Available exclusively on our YouTube channel, First Cut. Enjoy!
About 30 minutes away. We got some gas, but we've been powering through, going.
We are officially in Nevada. Tell us about that new state, new COVID rules.
A little bit nervous to see how this theater's gonna look, but I feel like they're gonna enforce some pretty strict rules.
Be sure people watching at home, wear a mask, take all the precautions, social distance, make sure you're abiding by all of your local health official guidelines. That being said, I'm not gonna lie, I'm excited to see Tenet. I'm excited to see this. I'm excited that we're actually making this pilgrimage out to Vegas. And let's see where we're going forward. Check out our new website on geeksofcolor.co/first-cut to check out our reviews, our videos, and articles that pertain to everything First Cut related. Check it out.
Come along, children. Now we're going to have a little music.
What is up, guys? We're back talking about Mulan. Now we're going to get into the 2020 live-action film, a film that obviously we can go on and on about the whole release structure of this thing. It was supposed to come out in March. It was supposed to be a massive release, especially internationally, with the Chinese box office being so important nowadays. Unfortunately, due to COVID, due to everything that's been going on in the world, they decided to release it online. I've had a lot of fun debates and conversations about my issues with the idea of giving that $30 paywall, making it so much more harder for families to watch it. I thought was necessarily not the right choice. However, besides all that, let's talk about the film itself. We all got the chance to see it. I'm going to go straight to you, RB3. I want to hear your initial thoughts as far as what you've seen of this movie.
Yeah, thank you for briefing it as what I've seen, because that is indeed true. I have not seen all of Mulan. Unfortunately, I did hook y'all up with the screen information via Dorian. Salute to Dorian, Geek Scholar. But I did not get to finish it. Just a busy day today. So I got about an hour in, but I feel like I can still give meaningful commentary like halfway through. But don't consider anything that I say a final review or a final thoughts or final opinions on Mulan, because I'm literally just observing it as someone who saw the first hour of it, not the whole thing. So,
Any thoughts that you have so far?
my thoughts. Okay, so here are my thoughts. Right. I personally, let's talk about adaptations in general, the Disney adaptations, right? The live action ones. I'm not the biggest fan of them. I really don't like any of them except for Jungle Book and Peach Dragon and a couple of others. But there's a couple, I don't like them because most of the time they don't feel like they add anything, and the things that they do add doesn't need to be added like whatsoever. With Mulan, that was particularly worrying for me because it's like, what usually the biggest thing that they add is like the whole like, oh, we know these characters were like poorly written when they're originally written in like the 50s or the 70s or the 90s. So let's like try and update it to make it more feminist and make it more woke and more progressive. But the problem with it is that they just, for me, my problem was that with Aladdin, they just added a song and acted like it was okay. And The Lion King, they just added a little bit more for Beyonce and thought it was okay. And it's like, you're not really doing much. For Mulan, the material is already there. So I was kind of thinking like they don't need to add that much. Like they don't have to do anything like that. They could just kind of tell the story, and I'm excited for it. What also made me more excited was hearing that they took out all the songs. I know a lot of people were like discouraged by that. I thought that was dope because it's like, hey, this is another way to make it different. Instead of it being like an animated thing that you are for the kids, this can be the adult, not necessarily adult version, but more adult, mature version of Mulan without the songs, still the same story, but be more of a serious war movie. And I thought the aesthetic and everything was already there for it too. Now, what's interesting about this movie is they actually did all the Mulan versions of it, at least from what I've seen so far. I think they did all the Mulan stuff really, really good. Like the animated movie goes at a rapid pace for telling Mulan's story, and the first hour of this movie goes to a rapid pace to telling Mulan's story. The thing that slows it down is that they add another parallel story to the mix with this witch and like this kingdom thing, and I'm not really fully understanding where that's going so far. Again, y'all could probably speak more to that. I know we're having a full spoiler discussion here, so people be mindful of that. We might be spoiling some things, but the Mulan stuff I thought worked really, really well, and I thought it was great seeing that live action, and I liked it even without the songs. I still really liked it. I just don't know about the witch stuff because those scenes felt incredibly slow, incredibly unnecessary. And I get the idea of like this is an antagonist and a villain who's also dealing with the same patriarchal issues as our main hero, and kind of seeing that parallel story. And at least it's not adding like a new song or something cheesy to it. It's actually adding something with a storyline and character and stuff like that. I appreciate that, but I just don't like how it slows down the film.
Yeah, Sabrina, I feel like to echo what RB3 is saying, this movie is going to be made or broken by, make or break with that new witch character. Talk to me about that specifically, and then your initial thoughts on the movie itself.
Yeah, I think going into this one, I don't know how much this relates. I don't know if I guess they might have just added it just to have that kind of parallel type of character that went through the same thing, but she chose the wrong path of becoming a villain and actually causing like harm and evil. And I don't know if that had anything to do with, because I know they're sticking closer to the actual story of Mulan that dates back to like the 5th or 6th century. So obviously I don't think this has anything to do with it. It's something that was really kind of like, for the first hour I was kind of like, I don't know about this, and at the end I didn't mind it necessarily, but I think they could have done without it, and the story would have been equally as profound. I just don't really, it kind of took me out a little bit with the whole witch when she was as a bird going through. I don't really know how to feel about that, and I would really have to on a rewatch kind of, just because the way it panned out, it's a fine moment, but was it worth it for that entire through line throughout the entire film? I don't necessarily know. But as for adaptations, I'm the same way as RB3, and I echo a lot of what he said, where if it feels, if it's actually going to progress the story, then I'm here for it. But if it's just like a cash grab or like adapting to like modern audiences, maybe kids don't want to watch the older animation and they want to see this live action, then I'm not really here for it. Like Lion King was like shot for shot, basically, and I just think that's unnecessary. But something like this, I like what they did. I like that they stuck to that original story and they kind of honored China and their culture a little bit more because they did have all of those actors. We have a really really great ensemble in this film, and they actually, like I mentioned with the dialogue animated one, they actually speak like they're from China in the 5th or 6th century. Like it felt more real, like we're immersed into this world, and it's not as flamboyant and eccentric and things like that as we saw in the animated film, also with characters like Mushu. So I liked what they did, but some points kind of felt a little bit duller and a little bit flatter. I like the film, but it didn't hit as I think the animated did one when I was a kid.
It's interesting you say these things. Obviously, let's address the elephant in the room, which is the Disney live action adaptations. I am that guy. You guys know that. I am the one defender of all these movies. I pretty much enjoy every single one of them because of what you said, Sabrina. And it's interesting you guys say that because you guys want change, you want advancement in the story. And yet, I'm a very simplistic guy. So I just like the idea of what you were saying, Sabrina, the idea that we do get to see a live action Asian characters be badass and be cool and be awesome. Live action Middle Eastern actors, the Egyptian brother who played Aladdin, that's an opportunity that's a once in a lifetime type of thing. And I love that he gets that chance. I love that we get to see that in live action. And I don't think necessarily that, I think that within itself is worth a price of admission or worth the price of making the movie. That's why that's the only reason why I push back, because I do feel like there is something to be said about these people being brought to tears on set because they're so inspired and moved by seeing so many Asians in this world and in this screen and in the set that they're in. I think that's a powerful moment within itself. So that's my thing about that. My thing about the movie, it's interesting, RB3. You know what's funny? I didn't like the first half of this movie, and I kind of did enjoy the second half more. So
I'm the opposite.
really, yeah, I thought the first half was really tonally unbalanced. I thought the comedy stuff didn't work with the buddy characters, at least from what I saw. I just was like, man, these guys are not as funny and as crisp as the original animated characters that are already super funny. Even just watching the old movie again, I was like, wow, these guys are still funny. I thought the comedy stuff didn't work for them. I just didn't care necessarily for the first half. I didn't like necessarily the power dynamic between her father in the first half, whereas the second half, when we started to get to the more action stuff, when we started to get reveals when it comes to the witch character, reveals when it comes to her eventually revealing that she is a woman, that she is Mulan, I love that they were immediately against that and that it didn't have this twist of like, well, actually, they accept her and everything's okay. I was like, if that happens, I probably won't like it because it doesn't make any sense. And the fact that Donnie Yen was kind of a dick in that scene, Sabrina, I don't know if you saw that scene yet, RB3, but when she reveals herself to be a woman, he's like, F out of here. And I was like, really? I thought we were supposed to like Donnie Yen. But they make him kind of a dick in that moment. And I was like, yeah, he probably would be a dick. Stuff like that to me worked in those moments. And the idea of her kind of teaming up with the witch, spoiler alert, RB3, that part made sense to me. And that part kind of made it worth it for me. And we don't get that till the second half. Because in the first half, she's just an evil witch. In the second half, she proves herself to be an ally to Mulan because she's a woman and because she sees that kinship with her as being two powerful women, two women that don't want to abide by the rules and abide by the laws. I like that. I thought that was really cool. That's why to me the second half worked better.
Yeah, I thought with that necessarily, I did, like I said, I thought there was like a few great moments within it, but I didn't think the way they portrayed it was like as I don't know if I believed it that she would make that like split decision like that just with Mulan saying a few things if she's been evil this entire time. It's kind of like when we get those moments from the villains when they realize what they did was wrong, even though she was in her same footsteps before. So like I understand it, but I don't know if it was worth the entire character for me.
Sure.
But I do want to echo because I don't want to be negative about this. I enjoyed this movie. It's really tough with everything that's happening, and of course we're not talking about like the release scheduling, but I think I am a tiny bit soured by that high price point for the film on Disney Plus. I think that's something because it's really not going to reach a lot of families because that's, even though we're like, oh, when we go to a theater, we spend more than that, it's still, thinking about per family, it's a high price to pay to sit at your own house. At least you get to pay for the whole experience when you see it in theaters. And I'm just soured by that kind of release. I would have honestly rather have them push it back. Maybe we could go and all enjoy it in a theater. And at the end of the day, this is the biggest movie we have gotten so far. This is the biggest movie that's got on VOD. And this is probably the biggest movie that we're going to really see and are going to see because a lot of people go into theaters. So for not, this is it. And I like it for that aspect. I like the celebration, of course, of the story. The story in itself is great because it's a very similar story to what we saw. So I like that young women are going to be able to see that. And we are getting that representation of a strong female character, but then also a strong Asian female character. I absolutely love that. And showing again that she's a warrior. But it wasn't so profound and something so new and re-energized that I felt like it was completely necessary. But I mean, out of all the live action ones, I could say that I probably like this a lot more than the other ones. Like, honestly, because I don't really like Aladdin, I don't like Lion King, yeah. So this is the better Disney live action film for sure, but I'm still just soured by the entire Disney live action in general, too.
Yeah, and I think, I definitely, I agree, Sabrina. I like this a lot more than I like a lot of the other ones so far. I haven't seen all of it so far. But there is, there's kind of conversation happening, and we're shooting this well before the movie comes out. Like, you're saying, the people watching at home have already seen it, but we've seen it where it is a couple of days before the movie comes out. So we don't even know what other critics are saying. But, I heard there's kind of, whispers amongst critic friends that, this movie's just all right. There's a reason they just put it on Disney Plus. You know what I mean? Do y'all agree with that as two people who have actually completed the full movie, or?
That's the problem, right? With what Sabrina's saying. That's 100%. If I would review this movie, I would be like, it's alright. That's exactly my review. And the problem with that is that you have to pay $30 for a $200 million alright. If it was free on Disney Plus, if there was no paywall, I would be like, it's alright, go check it out. Like, it's dope. Yeah, it's fun. It's got some fun moments.
Even in theaters.
Yeah, even in theaters, I would have been like, yeah, go check it out. Mulan doing backflips. Why not? But now that it has that $30 paywall, it's just so hard to be like, you have to pay $30 to watch this movie. I mean, obviously, again, we could talk about the whole idea of my family and my mom just being so excited for this movie. Every time she sees a trailer, she geeks out. So that's a different case. But other people around the country and around the world might be like, I heard it's I don't know if I'm going to pay $30. And that's my problem, man, is like, that is a big thing, Sabrina, and I'm glad you brought it up for sure. But for the movie on its own, because I feel like we should talk about it on its own, which is difficult to do, I know, because we have to think about the original, we have to think about the way it was shot, the whole release structure of it. But on its own, there's just a little bit of tone issues for me in the beginning of the movie and towards the end of the movie that kind of make me frustrated. And there's a little bit of, and I know I'm going to be that guy, and I'm so sorry, and I usually don't like to be that guy, CGI issues. I don't know if you caught this, Sabrina, or even you, RB3, in the first half, that really just like, whoop, took me out of the movie. And I was like, this does not look real at all. But a few of those that kind of took me out. But the main thing to me was the tone. I really would have loved to love her crew. If her squad was lit, like if she had like a straight up squad, like I got the funny guy, the goofy guy, the big guy, the small guy, and they were all like super like interactive and dynamic, I think I would have loved this movie. But that's my biggest issue with it, is her squad was just so flat to me. The Arrow guy, I thought was just, none of his jokes hit for me. The skinny homie, I thought I thought he was probably the best part, but the only problem was, like, I felt like he had the less lines than anyone else. He said like 3 lines. And then her love interest, we have to talk about that, right? I think it's so funny, and I will always think it's funny no matter who does it, because this isn't the first time we see a woman go undercover as a man or whatever. But I love it when homeboy is like, "Yo, bro, I think I'm catching feelings for you, dog." Like that whole like vibe, as far as like, "Yo, bro, you kind of cute, man." Right? Am I the only one who thinks that as I'm watching the movie? I'm just like, oh.
If she was man, she'd be a very beautiful man. It was a little harder to
Yeah,
kind
I'd
of
be like, "You're a pretty
blend
man."
her in. Yeah, it was a little bit harder with this in particular to actually believe that people would think that she was a man. That was another thing that it
Yeah.
just and the actress is great in the scenes, like she's really really great, but it is a lot harder. I mean, if I was there, I'd be like, "Damn, you're pretty as hell." Like,
Yeah, I'd be like,
it
"Bro,
really is one of
you're
those
cute."
yeah, and that's the tough thing about making this into a live action, because in the animated version we talked about how they were able to like disguise Mulan very well within it, and this one it does kind of stick out a little bit, not just in terms of like the fighting style or anything, but just the aesthetics and the way that this actress like is dressed up as this character. And it's like you said, it just a lot of these moments do really fall flat. I finished it during the movie. I was like, "Oh wow, okay, these are nice moments." And then afterwards, it's one of those that I'm not really thinking about it. Like, it's unfortunately, and it sucks so bad, because I mean, we have this strong female character, and in the third act, the fighting sequences and like her style of fighting and how light she is on her feet, I think it's very whimsical, and it's very powerful. It's this mixture of this like feminine power that we really see within her fighting, and I love all of that. But at the end of the day, I'm unfortunately not really, I don't want to give this like an immediate rewatch, but when I see a film like Mad Max and I see like Furiosa, I'm like, I need to watch this again. I need to see everything. And this is one of those where I have the screener and I don't really feel the need to sit down and watch it again for a second time and really dive myself into it, because a lot of the things, but I do love that they stuck to that original story. Like I said before, I like how they stuck to that story that's been going around for centuries in China. And we also get a little bit of, in the beginning, her as a child and how she's in this way. I love that. I really did in the film. I love that we see how adventurous and courageous she is as a kid, and how because in the animated one, we see her already when she's an adult that she doesn't fit in. But then in this one, we see her that she's a kid, and she hasn't fit in at all ever. And I like that. I like that element of seeing that small moment in the beginning. So there's a little bit of stuff that I love that they added to it. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I would rather watch the anime version. I think it's just more profound. I think it holds up so much better than this film does.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's unfortunate.
That's the problem, right? If the animated version wasn't perfect, because it's a perfect movie, to be honest, I think it's perfect. This one has a lot to live up to. And to be honest, guys, I know RB3, you said it was cool, but I can't lie. Part of me was like, if Homegirl broke out in a song right now, it'd be kind of cool. I'd be like, it'd be kind of dope if she broke out in song. I would have loved it if she started singing. That's probably my biggest criticism, is that people say Mulan, the songs are, I think Mulan soundtrack, as I said before, is one of the best all time. So if she did break out in song a few times, I would have been like, yo, this movie's kind of fire though, because it gives her more literally reflection on her character and reflection on herself. I think it would have worked to make it a musical. I'm sorry, y'all.
Well, I'm glad you said it, because the thing is, like I said before, when we were talking about the animated version, I was saying that we get so much story within those songs, like we really do, and we learn so much more about the characters. And like you said, those supporting characters really fell flat. Even her love interest fell flat for me, and I just didn't really get that same sense that I got from the animated. But if we would have had those songs, I'm so happy you said it, because if we would have had those songs, I think we would have connected with a lot of these characters a little bit more. Hearing Reflection, could you imagine hearing Reflection, a different version in today's day, like like, not saying that they have to change the song in any way, but like a new version of it. I would have loved to hear that. I would have loved to have Make a Man Out of You in it, and then we get attached to those characters that she's fighting with, because ultimately at the end of the day I'm like, oh, I hope it's Mulan, I know she's gonna make it out, I hope she makes it out. But I didn't really care about anybody else, and it really just went that way. I was like, I hope she does the job. I don't really care what happens to like any of the other characters too much.
That's exactly it. Is I feel like her side characters would have been more improved as more compelling characters if they had moments and songs and musical numbers. Frankly, I'm like pro musical numbers. I think it would have been fun. I think it would have been a lot more character development. I think it would have been a lot cuter. It would have been a lot more fun, a lot better for the kids to understand, and better for adults to enjoy as well, as far as nostalgia goes, because that's what they're trying to get as well. I just think that the emotional moments in the second half of the film actually work for me. Her final fight scene worked. Her encounter with her dad worked. Her new sword stuff thing worked. All that new stuff added into it. Even her being presented in front of the emperor was still a very emotional moment to me. I was like, oh, this is great. It works. And we got to see Ming Na Wen come in there for a little quick cameo. Shout out to her. She's the original Mulan. Came back for a quick cameo. And she's obviously Agent May, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I have to do that. But yeah, overall, the problem is there's too many downs for this movie for me to make it a full up, if that makes sense. I think it's equally balanced out, where there's enough good moments where I'm just like, I can recommend it, but there's not enough good moments to where I can say it's my favorite live action Disney film. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, I haven't seen the whole thing, but it's on the higher tier for me. But even at the higher tier Disney films, live action films are not even like that great either. So I would kind of even put it at like, I think I put it right at 3 out of 5 personally. I'm not, I'm not usually the one who gives scores, but Rotten Tomatoes is like 60% like positive, right at the middle. So I'll give it right at the positive line for me. But again, I've only seen the first half of it, so it could go bad from there.
Yeah, like if we didn't have these screeners and a friend called me up and was like, I'm doing an outdoor projection, social distance screening of it and I'm paying for it, so like I'm just inviting you, I'd be like, yeah, I'd watch it. But would I sit down and purchase it myself, seek it out myself if it wasn't in theaters? Not really. It's more positive, where I'll watch it again, I'll check it out again possibly, but I recommend it. But it's not the best, but also I agree with you where it's at the higher level of Disney, but that's because I don't like a lot of the Disney live action movies.
And I do. And I love the new Beauty and the Beast. I love that song, Evermore. I sing that joint every time I think about a girl. I'm just like singing that song at the top of my lungs. That song goes hard. It should have been, I think it was Oscar nominated. Oscar nominated song. I love it. And I think it would have been so cool, even if we got new songs. If Homeboy Love Interest for Mulan busted out in like a dope ass song, I think it would have been dope. I would have loved it.
It's interesting because we had like 30 extra minutes of runtime. We took out all the songs, but I feel like there was no development in any way with that extra runtime that added to the story necessarily. I think I would have loved if they used some of that time to add those songs or add those types of moments, and they just didn't. Yeah. This is longer, and there's less to work with.
Part of me wonders if they should have just took out the witch and just kept all the songs in and just made it a straightforward adaptation, because I did like the pacing of it. That's one thing I did enjoy. I did like the pacing of it, because a lot of these movies do feel kind of slow, but I like that it felt kind of fast in the Mulan moments. The witch moments in the beginning, not so much. That's where it kind of slowed down for me. But
I'm so curious about what people are going to think about that character, because I get the point of the character by the end, but in the beginning, she seems so like whatever. By the end, we get to see the whole like girl power moment, which I do feel like it is important, right. Because it shows that her only goal and her only motive is to kind of defy men and to go against men. So it kind of made sense to me that she would kind of team up with Mulan, or at least defend Mulan, because she sees that girl on girl connection where she's like, I see you, you're a powerful woman like me. But the whole idea of the chi being the amplification of her martial arts skills, and then the chi being the amplification of her witch powers, and having that connection there, I wasn't too sure about that, if I'm being honest. I think it would have been a little bit cooler to see Mulan have to train to get her martial arts abilities, rather than to just be a gifted natural talent. That's just my opinion. That's the only negative thing that I was like, oh, that would have been cool.
I like that if we would have gotten some of that, because clearly we got the footage from when she was a child and she had some type of like agile ability, and she could have had that and then worked from there instead of just having that natural ability. So I agree with what you're saying. I feel like there's just a lot to be desired from this one that it just doesn't give us. I feel like we could honestly talk about it for a while and really nitpick it. And, you know, this is really, really fresh in our minds. We haven't sat on it, and we're talking about it. We've all seen it today, and we're all talking about it cuff. And that's what's interesting, is that we are able to continue on this conversation and constantly find something. And I'm like, oh yeah, that really could have improved the story. And if I didn't even think about too much about like the love interest, because it was so dull, it didn't even stick with me at all. And I was like, there was nothing there. It really is one of those things.
Yeah, I really do feel like training sequences are so underrated. People hate them nowadays because they're cheesy, but it's a Disney movie. Like, it's supposed to be kind of cheesy. I think a training sequence where she improves her ability and you actually see that she learns how to fight would have been way cooler than just her being like a super powerful martial artist, like right off the bat. That's just me.
I want a training sequence. I want Bring Me to Life by Evanescence to play.
Oh,
just
hell
like
yeah.
That's what I want.
Hell
That's what
yeah.
I want
Have
from
Mulan sing it. Just be like, how can you? She just starts going off. That'd be amazing. And then her like love interest does the other part.
Yes.
How the two sides couldn't see. Like, literally.
And this is why we don't make Disney movies. This is why they don't hire us.
Also, like, straight up, I still think it's so funny. He'd be like, yo, bro, I'm catching feelings, bro. Like, I'm just being honest, bro. Like, I'm starting to catch feelings, cuz. Like, straight up.
I'm feeling something. I'm feeling something here. I don't know what it is.
Like, I'm gonna call up my mom and tell her that I'm having these conflicted feelings here.
Yeah, my pickle's getting a little tickled. You know what I mean?
He's like, hey, bro, you haven't taken a shower, though, cuz. Like, I haven't seen you take a shower, cuz. Like, the entire premise of that being, like, a theme in the movie, Sabrina, I thought was so funny. Just because of that, the idea that this guy is starting to have conflicted feelings, and he's, like, walking up in her tent and stuff, and I'm just like, bro, this ain't it, cuz. She's
and
a
then
girl.
she finally goes to take a bath, and then he's like, what's up? What's good? And so,
Yeah,
leave her alone.
exactly.
Leave her alone.
Yeah,
and I know we
exactly.
have but the moment, I feel like, even, oh god, it's so hard to not compare it to the animated film. It's really hard to think of it as one single thing. But, like, the moment in the animated film where she's like bathing and the other guys come in is just so much better than what we got with this whole like big serious like, oh, I'm like, go away, just because she doesn't want to like reveal that she's a woman. It's those little things that I just feel like whoever was behind it didn't care enough to really develop a lot of the outside stuff, and that's what furthers any story. It's not just the protagonist, it's everyone around it. It's all of the elements working together, and it's like, oh, let's add another woman, because even that moment you're talking about, I didn't believe it. I like the girl power moment that we got, but I honestly just didn't really believe it too much. But I do understand like the define men's expectations or define what men want and things like that. But it was too quick for me. Like, they had that conversation, then it's like, no, I'm gonna go fly and I'll lead you there. It wasn't fleshed out enough, and we had more runtime and they still didn't flesh out a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, I think overall those are kind of the same thoughts I echo. I mean, I thought it worked, but it just took so long to get there that I was like, man, I don't know if the witch character was worth it in the end because of that. Yeah, overall, I wish I could have gotten a little bit more, if I'm being honest, just because I've been anticipating this movie since even before it was announced. There's, I actually predicted this way back in the Schmoes day. I think like 2015 when we were doing like what's the next Disney live action, and I was like, oh, Mulan, that would be amazing. And eventually we got it. Unfortunately, it's not living up to the expectations, which were pretty high, to be fair. It's a lot to live up to, so I do feel like that's a little bit unfair. But again, I think what brings it down is that $30 paywall, which makes it even worse. We're just like, ugh. Now it's really just okay. It would have been pretty good, but now it's just okay because of that $30 paywall, at least for a recommendation goes. But either way, those are our thoughts on the new live action Mulan. Obviously, we sprinkled in a little bit of our own POV thoughts as far as bringing me to life and Evanescence. It sprinkled a little bit of that on my Disney live action.
Just pretend it's there in the film, and maybe you'll like it a little bit more.
Yeah, exactly. Give me a Daredevil moment. Give me some Bullseye. But either way, guys, those are our thoughts. And this was the entire Meaning Of episode. So thank you so much for watching the Meaning Of. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't done so already. Follow us at First Cut TMO. The good people, where can they find you? RB3.
Find me Twitter, Instagram at Director RB3.
Sabrina.
Twitter and Instagram.
I'm at Leader Ace, guys, and obviously you can follow us there to see more of our thoughts on Twitter. I'm sure it's going to be a big conversation, and also to see my tweets about the Adesanya fight this weekend. This is my UFC and Mulan connection right here. Yeah, it's coming together along with Evanescence. Yep, that's exactly it. That's what the homeboy wanted. But instead he got Mulan. He's like, damn it, I thought you were, damn. Oh well.
Andres said it, not me. He said it.
Either way, guys, for the Meaning Of podcast, I'm Andres.
This is RB3.
I'm Sabrina.
Peace. Peace out.